Do you feel as an American citizen, as a responsible officer of a labor union, as an elected public official, you have an obligation to strike out at communism whenever possible? Yes, sir. Have you done anything to stamp out communism in the International, or the domination of communism in any way in it? Anyone who knows me, or heard me talk, or talked to me, has known of my antagonism to communism, my outspoken opposition to communism. Have you noticed any communist domination in your union internationally? No, sir. At no time. No, sir. Have you at any time noticed any party line of communism in the resolutions adopted at the biennial conventions? Excuse me. I don't understand what you're talking about. If you'll just explain to me what it is about my question you don't understand, will you read the question? Have you at any time noticed any party line of communism in the resolutions adopted at the biennial conventions? I don't know the party line. Have you, as a responsible labor leader, made any attempt to learn what the party line of the Communist Party is? No, sir. At no time. No, sir. Did you feel any obligation to ascertain what is or was the communist line over the periods in which you have been an officer, a responsible officer of the Union? I felt my obligation was to represent the workers in all of the grievances and all of my duties as a responsible Union officer. Was your attention ever alerted at any time to communism in the International Fur and Leather Workers Union? I have read about it in the press, and I have felt there were communists in our union. Now, what, as a result of your reading in the press of communists, did you feel there were in your union? Would you name them and the time you made the discovery? Up until our international president resigned, I knew that he was, at the time he resigned. Up until the time he resigned, I knew he was. He resigned, didn't he, in 1950? Or he made a statement he resigned in 1950. He resigned right after a convention where we passed a resolution that we would sign non-communist affidavits. You knew at that time, if that was following the convention of 1950, you knew that he resigned from the Communist Party. I believe he did. Did you at that time regard the Communist Party as a conspiracy? Yes and no. Well, would you give us what your thoughts on communism were in 1950, following the annual convention of the Fur and Leather Workers Union, after which Ben Gold resigned or announced that he resigned from the Communist Party? Well, the reason I say yes and no, and the reason I asked counsel, was that I know that up to a certain time, the Communist Party was considered a legal party. Did you consider the Communist Party, you've told us you now consider the Communist Party an international conspiracy seeking the overthrow of the United States government. Did you feel that in 1950? Yes. You did? Yes. Did you feel that in 1949? Yes. So that you were opposed, and you knew in your own mind you had arrived at an intellectual conclusion in 1950, at the time of the convention, that the Communist Party was seeking the overthrow of the government of the United States. I believe so. All right. Mr. Chairman, Senator Powers has a question. May I go back 1 year? Did you believe that in 1948, Mr. O'Keefe? Yes, sir. Ever since I've been able to think about it, I have always thought so. Or I say ever since I've given it any thought, I have always thought so. Now, it was following the convention at which Ben Gold was re-elected in 1950, and at which the International Fur and Leather Workers Union voted to avail themselves of the Taft-Hartley Act, that Ben Gold resigned. Is that right? It was after that convention. And at that time, after that convention, he signed the Taft-Hartley affidavit. I was so informed. And that he made a statement of his reasons for resigning, which appeared in the official paper of the International Fur and Leather Workers Union, didn't he? I don't recall reading it. You mean to say, Mr. O'Keefe, that on a matter of such importance, on the matter concerning a party which you believed was dedicated to the overthrow of the United States government, you didn't read the statement he issued when he said he resigned? Is that the way you want to leave it on the record? I said I don't recall reading it. Have you any recollection of the reasons your international president gave or explanation of the Communist Party when he resigned in 1950? I don't remember. Not a single solitary one? Let me see if I can help you. Do you remember him saying in his statement, quote, "Those who deprive the people of their constitutional privileges and democratic rights are not patriots. Those who support the witch-hunting hysteria and the persecution of progressives and liberals, those who support the intensified attacks against minorities and the lynching of Negroes, are enemies of our country and not patriots. Those who conspire to plunge our country into war for the sake of amassing profits are the enemies of the country. Those who utilize a wartime situation when the youth of America is being killed in order to increase and multiply their profits, those who advocate and enact laws to enslave labor are foes of America and not patriots. In the Communist Party, of which I was a member for 30 years, I never found any trace of such fake patriotism. As a member of the Communist Party for 30 years, I saw the members of the Communist Party, its programs and activities, determined by one and only one burning desire to serve the best interests of labor and the people, to end the cruel exploitations of the working people, racial hatred and bigotry, and to build up an economically secure, politically free, united, democratic, and peaceful America. Neither I nor the Communist Party ever believed in or advocated the overthrow of any democratically elected government by force and violence. I have resigned from the Communist Party, but I do not give up my belief in true democracy." End quote. Now, as a responsible labor leader for a number of years, and as a member of the Resolution Committee in 1950, and having told us today that at that time you were a sincere believer that the Communist Party was an instrument seeking to overthrow and destroy the government of the United States, do you tell this commission you have no recollection of any of those words of Ben Gold published in the International Fur and Leather Worker? I do not have any recollection of reading it. My recollection of reading the Fur and Leather Worker is that I look at the report on wages, reopening of contracts, and anything about District 1, and that is my normal reading of the Fur and Leather Worker. Are you against loyalty oaths in government? No, I am not. Are you for the loyalty oath law in this state? Yes, sir. Were you for the loyalty oaths when you were the chairman of the Resolutions Committee in 1950? I would say I voted in favor of it, yes. Voted in favor of what? Of that resolution. Of what resolution? The resolution you just mentioned. Would you tell us what it was I just mentioned? I will have to read it. Would you read, or I will read it, and see if I read it correctly, the resolution? Quote, "Thought control and witch hunts. We demand an end to all attempts by government agencies and reactionary employers to impose the straitjacket of thought control upon the American people. End the so-called loyalty order. End the witch hunts. End the glorification of paid informers, labor spies, and disgusting stool pigeons, whose testimony is used to frame leaders of the common people's struggle for a better living. We demand the repeal of the unconstitutional wartime Smith Act, opposed by the labor movement. We demand an end to all thought control trials, and we protest the thought control trial and conviction of Brother Irving Potash, one of the 11 communist leaders. Minority political opinions and beliefs must be respected and secured. Without such minority rights, freedom cannot exist for any Americans." End quote. Do I read it correctly? This doesn't say loyalty oaths. What does it say about loyalty order? Loyalty order. The loyalty order, what do you understand about loyalty order? You, the chairman of the committee who drafted it. That somebody in a government bureau issues an order, and the loyalty oath is that somebody swears by the oath. What did you understand as the chairman of the committee of the abolition of the loyalty order? What was the loyalty order? I don't remember exactly, but I think what I was in favor of was against any head of a department from issuing a loyalty order. That is, you were against, were you, any investigation by which... I didn't say I was against any investigation. Then explain, how does a loyalty order issue that you asked the end of? I don't know anything about it. I don't know how they are issued. Who told you to draw up the resolution? I didn't draw up the resolution. Who gave you the information about what was meant by the end of the loyalty order? I don't remember, but I expect it was the discussion of the resolution committee, something that was mentioned about it. No. Where did you get those resolutions? Just a minute, Mr. Randall. Before you even say anything, I think I should make it clear. I voted for Ben Gold as international president, not based on his political beliefs, but based upon his contribution to the membership of our union. I want to make that clear. I also want to make clear that you knew he was a communist when you voted for him. Yes, sir. On your resolutions committee, where did you get the resolutions? Where did they come from? From the International Secretary-Treasurer. Who was the International Secretary-Treasurer? Pietro Lucci. Was he the International Secretary-Treasurer in 1948? Ever since I've been on the Resolutions Committee. Did he submit the resolutions to the committee? The way I recall, we got the resolutions, a meeting would be announced, a room and a meeting time for the Resolutions Committee, and the secretary of the committee would bring the resolutions into the committee, and I assume because of our constitutional procedure that all resolutions must be forwarded the International Secretary-Treasurer, that he in turn had turned them over to the secretary of the committee. Do you know where the International Secretary-Treasurer got the resolutions before they got to your committee? No, I don't. Did you discuss each resolution separately in your committee? We discussed the resolutions. How many on the resolutions committee? I couldn't remember. Could you estimate? I can remember when I was chairman of the resolution committee that there might have been 50 or more. 50 or more people. Delegates. I don't know. Other than that from various locals of our international, I don't know exactly from what. Could the president introduce resolutions himself? I'm not certain. I think that the Constitution calls for all resolutions must be adopted by their local and be sent to the International Secretary-Treasurer a certain period of time before conventions, and he in turn would turn them over. I think also they would have to carry the seal of the local. I don't remember exactly what the procedure is. I don't know whether we had discussions on our resolutions and arguments, and each resolution was finally called for a vote. I don't recall that we had the members stand. I don't think that was either an aye and no, or maybe a hand vote. I think that was either an aye and no, or maybe a hand vote. I don't recall anyone standing. I think it was all in favor, aye, opposed, no. Did you write any of the resolutions yourself? No, sir. Do you know any resolutions that stem from your particular local? I can't recall our local ever sending a resolution. I can't recall any. Do you know where the resolutions originally came from, except for the Secretary of the Union? I was appointed. By whom? By the chair, the international president. In other words, Mr. Gold, during all that period. Yes, with the approval of the convention. As chairman, did you vote on these resolutions in this committee? The chairman would only vote if there was a tie vote, and I didn't have any tie votes. Mr. Chairman, I think in fairness to the witness who has testified substantially what is the law, we should read in the procedure, because apparently this is going to be a point of much discussion, and I would like to read that section of the Constitution of the International Fur and Leather Workers Union of the United States and Canada, 1950, Section 9, appearing on page 13, the format for resolutions. Quote, Section 9, A. All resolutions submitted for the consideration of international conventions must be adopted by the local union, joint board, joint council, or district council, and shall be sent to the International Secretary-Treasurer not less than 5 days prior to the convening of the convention. International Secretary-Treasurer shall refer all resolutions to the chairman of the appropriate convention committees. B. Resolutions must be properly signed by the president and recording secretary of the local union, joint board, joint council, or district council, and impressed with its seal, otherwise they will not be considered official. The convention may by majority vote allow exceptions to the provisions of this section 9 so as to receive and consider resolutions which were not submitted as provided therein. End quote. Who was responsible for seeing that the provisions of your Constitution in this respect are carried out? The Secretary-Treasurer of our International Union. And you feel, as a member of the International Board, which you have been for, I believe, 12 years? That's right. And as Chairman of the Resolutions Committee at over 3 conventions, it is no concern of yours that those resolutions should be identified and considered in any way. I place all faith in Pietro Lucci. When he turned them over, I would consider that they would be legitimate. And the fact that this did not follow the procedure laid down in the Constitution didn't bother you in the least because you had confidence in this one man. We weren't technical. I can see that. Why do you suppose your Constitution provided this kind of procedure? Do you think it is just a frivolous position, or was there some reason for having all these things identified? Well, I assume so as to place the authenticity on the resolution. But as chairman of the Resolutions Committee, it never occurred to you that you had any responsibility for seeing to it that that was carried out? As chairman of the Resolutions Committee, I assume from my relationship with Pietro Lucci that the resolutions definitely came to his office. But you would have been satisfied if the Constitution put the whole thing in the hands of Pietro Lucci? No, I would be satisfied that he would see that the Constitution would be carried out. But you know it wasn't carried out. I believe you said you never knew where they came from. There was no attestation, no stamp, or anything like that. Until this morning, Representative Newman, I wasn't even up to date on the fact that the signature of the local... I knew there was supposed to be a signature and a seal, but I didn't know they were going to be turned over to us like that as a committee. And as a member of the International Governing Board, you were not familiar with the Constitution. It is a long Constitution, Representative Newman, and I have an awful lot of things to do, so those things can slip my mind easily in as far as particular points. Who runs the International Union? I took for granted it was the members of the board, but perhaps I'm wrong. It is run by the International President and International Secretary-Treasurer. A sort of two-man dictatorship? No. The International Board meets every 6 months to discuss problems of our unions. Locals more or less are on their own, and we can call upon the International for any assistance they feel they need. We operate more or less as districts within the International, in that we are more closely working together in districts rather than as an international. But the operating of the conventions is in the hands of the International Board. That is, what the International does as an international, it does under the supervision of a board. So once the convention starts, the whole convention is in the hands of the delegates. Mr. O'Keefe, do you want to testify here today that it is conceivably possible you were duped by those you believe to be on the level? It is possible. In view of what has been read and what you heard this morning, is it probable you have, Mr. O'Keefe? Every time I voted on resolutions, Representative Bresnahan, I voted never at any time in favor of communism. I argued about it at all times that it would come up. I made my position clear that I was not, never was, and I thought those who were had bats in their belfry. I at all times voted thinking this was the best thing for the labor movement. As you hear these now, do you think, and from what you've learned here this morning, have you a well-founded suspicion that these resolutions were communistically inspired by the leadership of your union? I couldn't say that. You couldn't say they weren't. I couldn't say they were, or couldn't say they were not. Now, I don't intend to skip over this, but seeing you said you are now cognizant that you took a loyalty oath in 1954, January, you are for the teacher's oath law in this state. Yes, sir. Are you for the law making communism a crime, which is a law in this state? Yes, sir. And has been since 1951? Yes, sir. Do you know that law is founded on what is known as the Ober Law of Maryland? No, I don't. When in 1952, in the same resolution, Committee Chairman O'Keefe's resolution on democratic liberty, it starts off, which I have read, quote, loyalty oaths, witch hunting, purges, end quote. And then it goes on to paragraph 4, quote, stop any and all attempts of legislative bodies, government administrative agencies, reactionary employers, or self-appointed vigilante committees to impose thought control upon the American people. Anti-democratic and repressive laws such as the Feinberg Law in New York, the Ober Law in Maryland, and thought regimentation laws of other states must be repealed." End quote. Now, when I tell you our law passed in November of 1951 was based upon the Ober Law, and you at your convention, as the result of the resolutions committee of which you were chairman, proposed that, and it was, quote, "all in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand, all opposed, unanimously adopted," end quote. Did you know that you were voting, and your convention, your international union, was voting when you voted against the Ober Law that the Massachusetts law on communism should be repealed? No. You didn't. If you had known that, would you have voted differently? Yes, I would. Today, would you have voted differently? Yes, I would.